This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the show. I am Phillip Jordan, in case you've forgotten who I am. I am an Auburn writer, contributor for the Auburn Wire, part of USA Today, Alabama for last word on college football. And welcome back. The Phillip Jordan Podcast has returned. The new Phillip Jordan Podcast is actually what we're going to be calling it. And it is going to be quite different than it was before. Took the last month. As you can see, I'm back in studio. The mini helmets are once again behind me. You're not seeing the bed, the nice little wall there, empty wall there behind me anymore, or me in my car. There was a few episodes there too as well, me recording from my car. But yes, the difference with the show now, of course, I mentioned just off the top, I'm a contributor to the Auburn Wire, covering all things Auburn Tigers athletics. And this podcast will now be more Auburn focused than it was before. I mean, I was just talking about a little bit of everything. I mean, the last one we did was UFL. This is New Orleans Saints. But Super Bowl, all the college football, basketball, all that stuff. So over the last month, I've kind of brainstormed and figured out, let's zero in. Now, for the Alabama fans, hit unsubscribe on their podcast catcher or on YouTube. I will say this, the show will focus on Auburn. That does not mean I will not talk about other teams in college football and the SEC. So basically, it's an Auburn podcast that also looks at the Southeastern Conference. So pretty much, I was to lay up Auburn really hit more of those. They would have beat Florida in the Final Four, and they maybe would have been the ones winning the national championship. But we will we'll table that for a different time. But what we'll do here, and for instance, today's show, I'm going to kind of go over some little tidbits, what's going on with Auburn. Then I'm going to play an interview I did on Monday with Blake Lovell from the Southeastern 16. We're going to jump into Auburn basketball. Kind of look back at the historic team Auburn had that did reach the Final Four. We'll look at the players that are leaving, and we'll look at the rebuilt roster Auburn has coming up, and they're still filling some spots out. Chad Baker-Mazzaro on Monday announced he's going to USC. That was a player Auburn maybe was hoping was going to come back, be part of this team. And we'll also get into Tahaad Pettiford. Will he return to the team? How big will that be for Auburn? And how does that change things where the team over at Southeastern 16 would have Auburn basketball ranked in the pecking order if Pettiford does return? So we'll talk about that with Blake. But then in the third segment of the show, the final segment, we'll dive into some overall topics, SEC mostly related. So, I mean, there'll probably be some Auburn stuff there too as well. But we will jump into also some overall SEC topics. And that's kind of how the show's going to be. And if you're watching on YouTube, you see me wearing a Green Bay Packers hat. I will go ahead and let you guys know there will be a Packers podcast coming. My third attempt at one. We're going to give this a better try than the last two. But I will be starting a Green Bay Packers podcast. I'm hoping to record something this week, kind of go over the Packers draft picks and where they're at with that and some Jair Alexander stuff. But if it's not this week, we'll jump into the Packers next week. And also the Wiregrass High School Football Board will be coming back soon. But that show is also going to be getting a facelift. So I've kind of looked at the last month's time off. I'm no longer podcasting for Wiregrass Daily News. I looked at it as a career reset for me in the podcast landscape, and I feel like the best way forward will be to have team-focused shows, but also have segments where we kind of go around the league, or around the conference, stuff like that. So that's where we're going. And this show's only once a week. That's all you're getting of the Phillip Jordan Podcast, talking all things Auburn athletics in the SEC. Same thing with the Packers podcast, and same thing with the Wiregrass High School Football Board podcast as well. So, yes, I'm podcasting probably just as much as I was before, but each show's only once. And I'm going to have separate YouTube channels for all of them eventually. And that's going to be a plan moving forward. Right now, it's still on the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. So check that out. And just letting you know, if you're listening to this on the old feed, I'm going to keep posting some episodes there, but eventually the Phillip Jordan podcast will have its own brand new on feed as well. We're kind of, like I said, hitting the reset button on a lot of things here. For people that used to watch me on YouTube, you can now see I have some new mini helmets. There's a Florida one back there, and there's a Georgia one back there, and you're going to see another G soon. I ordered this week the Packers alternate white helmet, so you'll see another Packer one down there at the bottom next to that Stallions and the Troy helmet down there too as well. Oh, and if everybody's wondering, let's just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead. We hadn't even got into topics here. Just, I'm so excited to be back. I want to share with you guys what I'm doing now. You see the Troy helmet. That's back there. So, okay, they're not dealing with the SEC. That's the Sun Belt team. And here's the expansion of the Wiregrass High School Football Report. We're going to expand it to more than just high school football. That will always be kind of like the main focus of that show. But Troy is right there on the border of the Wiregrass. So we'll be talking about Troy football and what's going on with them too on the show as well, and other sports in the Wiregrass, not just high school football. High school football will be the king of that show. Still will remain the same, but at the same time, we're going to expand some stuff there. And that way, I kind of keep the Trojan conversations going in podcast form. It was either that or just create a Troy podcast. I just don't know if I'm ready for 4 or 5 podcasts right now. But again, we're only going to do all of these once a week, and just check it out. Check them out right here on YouTube, or you can also check them out on all your favorite podcast platforms. All right, so let's jump into it. Like I said, I got Blake Lovell coming on from the Southeastern 16. He'll be on in just a few minutes to talk about, and I'm going, YouTube audience, or if you're listening to this live, I guess it's too late to tell this. There was a timestamp in the description. I'm just going to let everybody know when you can actually start listening to the actual sports stuff instead of me announcing all this stuff. I guess I should have done a teaser, but hey, we're here. It's late, and we're going to roll with it like this. But let's jump into some stuff about some Auburn stuff, and I'm just going to leave this open to football. That's where we're going to stay at with this. But let's jump the transfer portal and football. Of course, after spring, a lot of movement, a lot of stuff going out there. Looks like Auburn could be landing another quarterback here very soon. And by the time you listen to this episode, this podcast, they very well may have this quarterback now on the roster. Matthew Caldwell from Troy, he entered the transfer portal on May 21st, and looks like he's headed home to Auburn. He played high school football at Auburn. He started his college career at Jacksonville State. Then he went on to Gardner-Webb. In 2023 for Gardner-Webb, he completed 57% of his passes, 940 yards and 7 touchdowns on that season. And then last year, Troy started a lot on the second half year. Just Troy had some issues at quarterback just with injuries, with everything they had going on there. But he played well. He played better toward the end of the year. Had some good performances there for Troy as they got a few wins there at the end. Of course, they weren't bowl eligible, but he had a 63% completion percentage, threw for 1,608 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. The interceptions thing was kind of an issue with him. Sunbelt Player of the Week after they defeated Georgia Southern, where he threw for 288 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns in the 28-20 win over Georgia Southern there. So obviously, this is a quarterback that's not going to be competing for a starting job. We all know who's going to be that. It's going to be Jackson Arnold. He's going to be the starting quarterback for Auburn. But this is a guy that gives Auburn depth. He's got some eligibility left. He's got some experience. And look, for him, you can see it. You get to come home. So that's the way that's looking there. Auburn in the draft. Look, this is where we want Hugh Freeze to get Auburn back to where they need to be. Auburn did not have a player drafted on day 1, and they did not have a player drafted on day 2. So that means the first 3 rounds, no draft picks. Jarquez Hunter was the first pick that Auburn had get picked up by the LA Rams, 4th round, a 117th pick. That's pretty good. I think Sean McVay, running backs, I think they have a good track. They have a good track record here, and he's kind of player that should fit well with them. Keandre Lambert-Smith, the Chargers, in the 5th round, 158th pick. They need receiver help. They need more players around Justin Herbert. So this was a need for them, I believe. And then linebacker Jalen McLeod, he's going to the Jaguars, the 6th round, 194. He was one of Auburn's best pass rushers, and they didn't have a lot of those. They still don't have a lot of those. We'll see how it goes this upcoming season. But he goes to the Jaguars. They had a lot of undrafted free agents, though, did Auburn. You've got Jason Jones off the defense line going to Baltimore, Peyton Thorne going to Cincinnati, Camp Arm. Look, I don't expect Peyton Thorne to be on the roster even when preseason starts. Could be surprised, but I feel like this is a player that's going to be a coach. Rivaldo Fairweather is going to Dallas to tight end. I still think Rivaldo's got some talent that can be used in the National Football League. Eugene Asante, he's going to Miami. This is a guy I think a lot of people thought could be drafted, obviously late. He wasn't. Now he goes to the Dolphins. A lot of Auburn players going to the Vikings, and if you watch on YouTube, see the Packers hat. I don't care about that team too much. But Robert Lewis, wide receiver, linebackers, Austin Keys and Dorian Maosi, they're going there. Punter, Oscar Chapman. I think out of all these players, to be honest with you, Oscar Chapman's probably got the best shot at sticking just because of his position. And then the Titans, they signed Isaiah Riggs at linebacker. So that's kind of like your look at what Auburn did with all that. There's going to be some more transfer portal news with the Auburn football team coming up. I think next week we're going to focus more on that. I'm going to reach out to somebody to talk Auburn's transfer portal activity here in football post-spring. That'll probably be what is the main topic for next week. But now I'm going to play my conversation I had on Monday with Blake Lovell, and we pretty much talked like an hour after Chad Baker-Mazzaro announced he was going to Southern Cal. So we do talk about that. We go 26 minutes, and if you're a wrestling fan, we do have a wrestling topic we talk about at the end of the conversation. Look, I'm going to let you guys know, if you see me talking to Blake Lovell, Blake's a wrestling fan, I'm a wrestling fan, we are going to have at least one wrestling question toward the end of the broadcast. So I hope you guys enjoy my conversation with Blake Lovell. Look, this guy knows it all when it comes to SEC basketball. My return episode back to podcasting world, I had to bring in the most knowledgeable SEC basketball guy I know out there. Good friend of the show, as always. Blake Lovell, check him out over at the Southeastern 16. And also, hey, if you like the NFL, has an NFL podcast, Established the Pass. But we will not be talking about why Shedeur Sanders dropped to the 5th round in the NFL draft on this episode of the pod. But, Blake, I appreciate you coming on. Talk some Auburn basketball.
Yep, always enjoy it, Phillip. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. That we may do a Shedeur Sanders deep dive later on in the summer. That might be what comes for the show. I know. I guess kind of for you getting a break now after the season. I think you were the first one I saw on Twitter. It was several years ago. Say we sleep in May. So May is almost here. So you're almost ready to get some sleep, Blake.
Well, it's much different than it used to be a while back, where you actually would get a little bit of a break whenever the season was over. Now it's like, call it a break, but it's really just trying to figure out who's on the roster for next season. And we still don't know who it's going to be. Like we still don't know the full rosters for all these teams yet. And it just, it gets a lot more interesting now in the off season, because you try to take a break from the games, but now you're like, okay, well, I got to figure out where this guy, what he did here, and how did he play against these kind of teams and all this, because now he's transferring in there. And, he's the 7th player that's transferred in there. So how do you, compare him to these guys and that guy? So, but I mean, that's where we're at now, right? I mean, every team pretty much looks different to a certain extent every single season now. And that's just, again, kind of the fun of it, is to see where all these guys are going to wind up. And, what do you know? The SEC, once again, I mean, there's just lots of guys coming in, lots of guys leaving, and that's just where we're at now. So,
today we're going to talk about Auburn, and usually you see a complete changeover of a roster now when there's a new coaching staff coming in. Same coaching staff, Bruce Pearl, but when you've got your whole roster full of seniors, basically, you knew this was coming the whole year, that Bruce Pearl and the staff was going to have to retool and just pretty much recruit a brand new roster for next season. Before we jump into these guys that are coming in, the new look team, just looking back at this Auburn team, I think, obviously during the tournament, during the season, all the quad 1 wins where Auburn getting to the Final Four, narrowly losing to Florida in that game. We talked about this being the best Auburn team ever. The dust kind of has settled now. We've had a couple of weeks. When you look back at this Auburn basketball team, do you look at that now? This is the greatest Auburn basketball team we've ever seen.
Probably. I would probably still support that argument, just because I think when you look at the overall accomplishments, and I know it's like, well, you didn't win the national championship, but if you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, they did all these things in the most historic single season we've ever seen, not just for the SEC, but any conference ever in college basketball. They did all these things within that, right? They were the number one team pretty much the entire year, knowing that. Look at the non-conference schedule they played. And like, you go back now and you're like, okay, well, they played every team that was in a historic Final Four. They played Houston, they played Duke, they played Florida. And so I think when you see the body of work that they put together to be sitting there clinching the SEC on March the 1st at 27-2, having played through the toughest single season conference ever, and to be sitting there at 27-2 after also playing, a non-conference schedule that was just brutal. I mean, I don't know how we probably don't classify them as the best, knowing that they still managed to get to the Final Four. And at that point, it's like, okay, if you got to the Final Four, and let's say you lost to a 5 or 6 seed or something. Okay, well, I mean, a little bit of a big regret there. You're like, I don't know if I can look at this team the same. They lost to a 5 or 6 seed. I know that team got to the Final Four, but whatever. But they lose to Florida, who won the national championship. And so, I don't really look at that as something that, will it sting? I'm sure for a while. Sure it will, because that what you felt like was your best chance to win a national championship. But the overall body of work to me supports the idea that, I mean, as we said, that group of Final Four teams were among the best teams we've ever seen from like a statistical standpoint. And they just all happen to be playing each other in one Final Four. And so I think for Auburn to get there, even though they lost to Florida, take the full body of work that they played for 38 games. And I think it probably is statistically the best team they've ever had.
Yeah, you're trying to really look at it, for all these teams, for the Dukes of the world and Kansas and, those teams that make it to the Final Four more on a regular basis. But when you really take that away, it's hard to get there. That is an accomplishment whenever you get to the Final Four. And Bruce Pearl's done it twice there at Auburn. And I guess, too, you always want to play the best teams. I know that. But also you got to look at it from, especially probably the fans more side of it. Bad luck Auburn got, because usually, you're right, there's usually a 5 or a 6 that gets to the Final Four. No. You're going to have to beat all the number ones, and it doesn't work out for Auburn that way. I don't think so, but anything there with the whole SEC champion, any kind of like, you feel like people may put an asterisk on it because they lost to Florida twice, and then Florida won the SEC tournament. I think from that point, the Bruce Pearl haters out there, we know they're there, probably say, well, you're not really the best team in SEC. You lost to Florida twice. I think they were, but the conversation's out there. Yeah,
and I think what's interesting is like, so they win the SEC regular season title. And if you really think about it, they finished 32-6 this past season. And I know not everyone's going to look at it this way, and I'm not even going to dare classify the Alabama game in this qualifier I'm about to use. But if you really think about it, they lost 6 games. 2 of the games really didn't matter that much, right? The A&M game, they had already clinched the regular season, really didn't matter. The Alabama game, yes, it didn't matter for the regular season title, but it mattered because, come on, it's the Iron Bowl of basketball, and you never want to lose that game, especially in a home setting in overtime to your arch nemesis. I get it. But the Tennessee game in the SEC tournament really didn't matter. I mean, it really didn't. Like, it wasn't going to change the seeding one way or the other. So I'm like, all right, take 2 of those out. Okay, so now if you say, all right, 4 losses in games that were truly, come on, like these are high profile, big time, consequential games. Like we could even say that for a game that was played on February 8th when Auburn was still undefeated in the SEC. It still meant something. It's a big game. They lose to Duke, who again also made the Final Four. They lose to Alabama, as we said, big rival, had a chance to get there. They were in the Elite Eight, had a chance to get the Final Four. They ran into Duke too. But then the other 2 losses of those 4 that we're going to keep in this category, that they came to Florida. And, it's like, again, sometimes it's just you have a team that has your number. Florida had Auburn's number this year. And that was the team that probably from the very beginning when we saw the bracket, you're saying, yeah, don't maybe love the idea that Florida and Auburn are on the same side if I'm an Auburn fan. Just don't love it. they both got to get there. But if they do get there, don't love it for Auburn, because it is a team that we saw what they did the first time around. So I just think you got to look at it and say that was just that one team that really had their number. Can you say that Tennessee had Auburn's number? No. Can you say Alabama had Auburn's number? No. Even though they beat them, they didn't have their number, right? A&M, come on. That was about as classic of a letdown spot as you'll ever see, knowing what A&M was kind of playing for at that point too. So Florida was the only team that felt like it had Auburn's number this season, and it just so happened that was the team they played in the Final Four. So I don't really see how you take that away, anything from what they did, just based off of the team as good as Florida was.
No, not at all. The big they had a problem because with Janai Broome, it was an issue for him. Replacing him, obviously that's the big talking point too around Auburn, I think too. How do you replace Janai Broome? But Blake, when I look at this kind of jumps into the conversation here, who they bringing in, rebuilding this roster. Guys like Denver Jones, Dylan Caldwell, and I know with Chaney Johnson, there's some still question with him, but he may be able to come back if he's able to, have some eligibility left. But the glue guys for this team were key, like Denver Jones. I mean, how many times when they played a team with a great guard during the year, especially we saw what he did when they went to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama, the defense and the big threes. I think Denver Jones' ability to hit some big threes this year was a part that didn't get talked about enough. And then, of course, Dylan Caldwell was just a leader on this team, not the stats guy, especially scoring, but you just knew what you're getting at him from a leadership defense. I think that's going to be a big question for this team, replacing those players, because we know the players that got coming in are talented, but just those guys that did the small things that we didn't really see on the stat sheet.
Well, this is one of the more experienced teams in the country last year, which helped. Everyone made the jokes about how they were all senior citizens and all this other stuff. But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that they had played together for a while. And, as always, you have some new guys that join the mix every offseason, but think about kind of the nucleus of the team and how many minutes that some of those guys had played together, specifically looking at that front court group. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a big question, because you've got some older guys coming in that obviously, have experience. One of those guys has a lot of SEC experience, we know, and Keshawn Murphy from Mississippi State. But, you've got older guys coming in, but it's just going to be different. You're not going to be as experienced you were last year. You're basically going to, for the first time, have a team that hasn't played together, in terms of it's going to be nowhere close to the sort of continuity you had on last year's team. So, yeah, it's a much different challenge for Bruce Pearl this year, I think, in terms of knowing that this is a different team. Even if you have one of the guys coming back, maybe, from last year in terms of, a significant part of your rotation, like you said, maybe add another in the mix, depending on how things play out over the next month. But yeah, I mean, this is it's a completely different team. And I think that starting with the leadership aspect and just the chemistry, that's the question always too in this area. Can guys play well together? They play well, but can they play well together? You don't ever know when you get some of these teams. And we see how it can work out in Florida's standpoint, right? They had a mixture. They had some guys come in that all of a sudden just had great chemistry together. They had some guys who had played together for a couple of years that they built that chemistry together. And that was one of the reasons why they were so successful. And so I think, yeah, that's always a big storyline heading into, this part of the season as we get closer to it.
I know from the portal side too, for Auburn losing, I think nobody was surprised Ja'Kai Howard entered the portal and left, just because everything that happened. He wasn't getting a lot of playing time with this team. But Chad Baker-Mazara, you kind of felt like this could be a guy that could return. And we're recording this on Monday in the news. He is going to USC. That's where he is transferring. We talk about senior citizens. I mean, we know the jokes are there with him online. But were any surprise that Chad Baker-Mazara will not be an Auburn Tiger next season?
I'll be honest, nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to transfers, because I know what it's like in terms of you're always kind of going to the highest bidder. I mean, that's really what this is now. I'm not saying it's the case in every scenario. I'm not saying it's the case in Chad Baker-Mazara's scenario. I don't know, but if I'm looking at it in the optics of everything, right, it's just, I have to look at it and be like, okay, well, clearly USC had some money to spend, and maybe they were in a scenario where they were able to spend more. Look at the situation with someone like Rodney Rice from Maryland, who was either going to Tennessee or Villanova. He was either going to Tennessee or Villanova until he chose USC. And so it's like, well, I mean, so should I be stunned that Chad Baker-Mazara is going to join the Bus Bus out there in LA? Maybe not, just because clearly they have something that's working for them from a transfer standpoint of being able to bring in guys, high impact players that are just going to come in and have, success already. They're going to be able to build off of that. And so I'm just not stunned anymore when anybody, I don't care if it's the best player on a team. I don't care if it's, the guy who's getting the least minutes on the team, right? They're the extreme examples, but both are kind of in the situation where it's like, why should we ever be surprised if they're leaving to go somewhere else? Because everyone has different motivations. And, to me, the guys on the higher end, that's probably going to be very financially driven. And I just think, hey, for whatever reason, USC was the better fit for Chad Baker-Mazara. And maybe, again, there were more reasons than one for that. I don't know. But I see this, Phillip, as nothing more than bidding wars at this point. I mean, I think that's where we are.
Yeah, it's free agency. Everybody's on a 1-year contract. I mean, it's like that football and basketball. Talked about the front court. Dylan Caldwell, Janelle Broome, he had so much experience, and now they're bringing guys that have playing experience. Obviously, not together. You mentioned Keyshawn Murphy coming from Mississippi State, good player on both sides. About 12 points a game he averaged last year for the Bulldogs, and then you bring in from UCF Keyshawn Hall, the leading scorer in the Big 12, 19 points per game, 43% percentage. And he's a guy really, you can list him at forward, and Bruce Pearl talked about it. You can play him at different positions. He's a very versatile player, really big-time scorer there, of course, for UCF. When you look at those two guys there, what stands out to you most with those guys and how they could fit in with how Bruce Pearl likes to run things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we mentioned kind of the leadership and the just, maybe – not as experienced they were last year. That's where I think Keyshawn Murphy is. Keyshawn Murphy is just, to me, like, he's kind of that SEC big man. Like, he is sort of the perfect example of a guy that just can go out, do what he needs to do around the rim. Obviously, I mean, he's 6'10", 230, whatever, a Birmingham native, as we know. And I just think that he kind of can tie a lot of things together in terms of what they're going to need to replace on the defensive end, but also offensively too, right? I mean, he will be able to get you some baskets and such, but I think, the length that he brings, being able to block shots, those kind of things, the rebounding, is obvious. But to me, I'm like, okay, he's a guy that you had to have on this roster based on the way the rest of the roster is filled out. And that's where Keyshawn Hall is a different player, where, you look at the numbers that he averaged last year at UCF, really the past couple of years. I mean, he's averaging almost 20 points per game, 19 points per game. Last year, averaged 17 the year before. And again, you're talking about somebody who is going to be able to, I think, rebound the ball really well. And so you feel like you're at a great starting point with these two guys, 6'7", 235 for Hall. I feel like they're kind of your natural replacements for the front court. Now, again, I'm not saying they're going to be exactly what Broome and Caldwell and Chaney Johnson, those guys were, but it's a different makeup. But I think these are two proven, experienced guys who are going to be able to step right in, and you're not really going to have a lot of questions about whether they can adapt, right? And I think sometimes that's what we always say, the difference maybe sometimes when it comes to guards adapting to the SEC, front court guys adapting to the SEC. I don't think there's going to be a huge transition period for Hall. I think he's going to be fine. And like we said, Murphy's already been playing in this league now for multiple years. So I just think it's kind of a really good setup. And I think that was certainly the strength of, when you look at the transfer, pulls that they've had, this was kind of the strength of it, be able to get two guys that are very proven. And remember too, this isn't 5 years ago where Hall's coming over from the Big 12. He played at UCF, but we got to remember sometimes, Phillip, it's hard to keep up with this stuff, but they're in the Big 12 now. So, he's playing against the teams that are very physical too in the Big 12, different styles and those things. And, I just think he's going to fit in great, I think, under Bruce Pearl.
Looking at the backcourt, you had Kevin Overton come from Texas Tech, another Big 12 guy, kind of a 3-and-D top player, maybe could fill in the Denver Jones role with this team. And he had D2 and a JUCO guys coming in. Elijah Freeman, D2, averaged 19 points per game, and a lot of excitement over Abdul Bashir from JUCO. How do you kind of grade how they did with the backcourt additions there?
Yeah, I think, to me, like you said, I think replacing Denver Jones is one where you just gotta understand, like, this guy, and Bruce Pearl said it, I don't know how many times last year, it's like, he just didn't get enough credit for the defensive side of the floor. And, I think that's where specifically we said, you look at maybe what the guys in the front court are going to bring from a defensive aspect, but I think that's where you want to see how the defense develops in the backcourt too. And like you mentioned, Overton's coming over from, a Texas Tech team, like we said, that statistically, from a probability standpoint, should have been in the Final Four, right? Auburn should have been playing Texas Tech. They should have been playing Florida, based on how that game unfolded. But, they did. And I think that's where Overton, you've seen some of those big kind of pop type games he's had, for the Red Raiders. And I think someone too, obviously you need the size in the SEC, 6'5", coming in, being able to play the guard position there. And he had some games last year too, where he'd step out, shoot the ball really well. And I think that's something too that stands out for me with this backcourt. That's one of the questions I will have probably is, what does it look like from a shooting standpoint? Remember, they finished as a top 70 team, 3-point wise this past year, shot about 36%. Curious to see if that holds this year, because I think you're going to need some guys that, can sort of, again, adapt to the way the SEC plays defensively. And that's where you mentioned Bashir. Can he be someone that can do that? That comes in, obviously look at some of the numbers that he put up and such, at the JUCO level, but still, he feels like someone that when you're looking at, okay, what Bruce Pearl likes to do offensively and how he can fit into that. It just seems like kind of a natural fit there in terms of what he's going to be able to do. So, again, you're bringing in guys who are going to, make a big impact. It's just, we're going to do this because how can we not? We're going to compare and say, all right, last year they did this year they're going to do that. It's just a natural thing, because as we started the conversation with, that's how good that team was. So some of this is going to just look a lot different. And that's where we see, like I said, how does the 3-point shooting develop? How does the perimeter defense develop? And those kind of things. And of course, Pettiford's back in the mix. Then obviously, you've got a guy who proved that he can be one of the best players out there as a freshman. You don't really have a lot of questions about what he's going to bring to the table, but you're still going to look at it and see how these guys kind of fit in their new roles for this Auburn team.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to close, because I purposely left him out of the open, Tahaad Pettiford, because if he decides to not go to the NBA and comes back, that's a big get, obviously, for Auburn, because automatically he's going to be your starting point guard. We saw what he was able to do in some big games. I know he did not play well against Florida in the Final Four game, but another year, he's got some experience. Obviously, you got to look at, too, if he comes back, you got to look at him going into the season as Auburn's best player, just because of his upside. And already you see him be taught greatly from the NBA scouts. Just if he comes back, just where does that raise Auburn, you think, next year? I know we're still in April. The season doesn't start to November, but still, Tahaad Pettiford coming back, that'd give Auburn a lot of momentum, I think, for this basketball team.
Yeah, look, it's probably that it feels like kind of that make or break decision where, if he comes back, I think, I was trying to, we've already started looking ahead and knowing that still have to be spots filled on these rosters. But if you're doing kind of a way too early look at the SEC next season, the difference between us putting Auburn in the top 6 or maybe not putting Auburn in the top 6 is him. It's probably that simple, right? Because you look at some of the other teams and we can see some of the way, way, way too early top 25s and all that. To me, there are several teams where it's just like, there's on no planet can I leave these teams out of that discussion. And to me, it's like Florida is going to be in there. Arkansas is going to be in there. This is a great Arkansas roster. Alabama's probably going to be in there. Kentucky's going to be in there. They've probably had the best portal season of anybody in the SEC, maybe. Tennessee's going to be in there. Everybody else is kind of debatable in the SEC, I think. Texas, I think, is a team that, let's say Pettiford doesn't come back. Well, to me, I may have a strong thought on, having Texas maybe eclipse Auburn and kind of looking ahead to next season, because I think Sean Miller's put together a really good roster in a very short amount of time in his first offseason with Texas. So, I don't think it's the difference in Auburn being an NCAA tournament team and not being an NCAA tournament team. I don't want to say it's that dramatic because I don't think that's right. But obviously, if you have someone like that who could legitimately be an SEC Player of the Year next year, right? If everything goes right, then, if you have him, that's one thing. If you don't have him, that's another. And so, to me, that decision is going to be very significant. And, again, maybe that's what keeps them either right there, near the top of the SEC. I don't think it's fair to think they're going to go out and be the number 1 overall seed next season by any means, but he's the catalyst here. And if he's back, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be just fine and probably be a top 15, top 20 team, something like that to start the season. So,
what is your gut telling you on Tahaad Pettiford if he's back or not?
I think he's back. Now, again, that's no inside knowledge or anything. I look at the way things go now, right? And we talked about how different it is with the transfer portal. And if you look at some of the exits for Auburn, I mean, to me, I'm like, it's basic math, right? You got a little bit to spend. And so why would you not probably go very heavy in pursuing his return? And to me, I'm like, it just makes a lot of sense. Whereas we know, I mean, hey, if you're talking about NBA first round money and all this kind of stuff, then obviously it's really hard to turn down that potential. But I also just think of it as, hey, if you are looking ahead to the NBA, could he go in and play in the NBA next year? Of course he could. But I'm also thinking, could he also play under Bruce Pearl another season and do what we've also seen a lot of Bruce Pearl point guards do over the year, and that's just get better and better and better, and then go in and just be an absolute, superstar potentially. Now that can happen too. But the good news for him is he's got pretty good options, I think, both ways. But I would probably make a prediction that I think there's a decent chance that he returns. But again, that's just flat out prediction. That's no inside information.
Yeah, just following it like I do. My gut tells me he will be the starting point guard for the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah,
next year. So, Blake, we've gone 24 minutes. Do you have time for a non-basketball question?
Please, Phillip. You know I've always got time for whatever question you're going to ask me in the field that you're going to ask me about it in, because I know what it is. So I'm ready for this one.
So I think from now on, just whenever we get together, this should just be tradition. At the end, we have one topic or question on this subject. And everybody has been listening to me and Blake's conversations probably the last 4 or 5 times. They know this is going to be a WWE-related question. So we're coming off WrestleMania. John Cena is trying to ruin wrestling. We know we're getting him and Randy Orton. So I wanted to ask you, I believe that SummerSlam, Cody Rhodes gets the belt back against John Cena. I think that's probably what's going to happen. Cody Rhodes is gone for a while, and then he will come back and take the belt back. How do you see this John Cena 17th title reign ending, or does he ruin wrestling and retire with the belt?
Well, some may say he ruined wrestling on night 2 of WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas when he had Travis Scott help him, but that's a story for another day.
Yes.
I think there's one of two ways this thing goes, because you have to do the ultimate sort of character arc for Mr. Cena, where he's got to come back to the good side at some point. And so you have all these people coming out, just random people, right, that are pointing out all of these obvious things about how he's turned into this guy and how they thought he was this and he should, all this. So, like, to me, they're just going to connect that together for months and months and months until he realizes the light bulb goes off. And he's like, all right, everybody was right, whether it was Orton, whether it's R-Truth, talking about him being his hero and all this other, like all this kind of stuff. It's going to come back. So to me, it ends one of two ways. Either you have Cody just simply beat him. They do the tag team match where it's Cody and Bad Bunny against Cena and Travis Scott, and that gets Cody, the opportunity to get the title back at SummerSlam. Or I also kind of like the idea of, do you do the ultimate sort of ironic twist where you do the same thing that happened to Cena with Punk many moons ago in Chicago, where they do the same kind of thing where it was Punk basically daring that he was going to leave with the title and leave the WWE with the title and then all this other stuff. And of course he wins and, they screwed it up after that. But still, I'm like, that to me would be pretty fascinating too. If you have the exact same setup, do it again. And then maybe Punk is the one who saves, whereas he was the one that was sort of daring to ruin everything, just like Cena was back at that time, whatever, 2011 or whatever it was. So one of two ways there, I think, is how it ends for Mr. Cena in his title run. But how it ends for him overall, I mean, I think it's just like they're going to do the ultimate. All right, John, you realized this was not worth it. Come on, your soul was not worth this. So we'll get there by December, I would think.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to. Yeah, you gotta throw Punk at him.
Yeah,
in this scenario. So that's gonna be fun. And Blake, this has been fun. Talking all things basketball and some WWE action for everybody there. Let everybody know where they can follow you online and check out all your work.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Phillip. Yeah, find us SEC stuff over on YouTube, Southeastern 16. Follow all of our SEC basketball offseason stuff with the transfers and everything there. Of course, we got football and baseball too, so check it out. And yeah, everything else, I'm on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
All right. Everybody go check Blake out. And Blake, once again, appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again.
I always enjoy it, Phillip. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks again to Blake Lowe for coming on from the Southeastern 16. Fun conversation there, talking all things Auburn basketball. So now this is where we will go around the SEC segment of the show. Kind of going a little light on it on the first episode back. NFL draft over the weekend. 79 SEC players drafted over the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And look, I know a lot of people are down on the SEC. The SEC hasn't won a national championship 2 years. Hadn't had a team in the championship game 2 years. You know, we had Michigan and Washington year before, and then this past year it was Ohio State and Notre Dame playing for the national title. But when you look at the draft, the SEC once again reigns supreme. They do have the best collection of talent, and that's one of the reasons why I still say it is the best conference in college football, without a doubt. And one of the guys taking Jackson Dart. So, of course, we know a lot of the talking points, the storylines. Mel Kiper Jr. pretty much going crazy over the weekend because Shadur Sanders from Colorado fell to the 5th round. We knew Cam Ward from Miami, first pick there. But who was going to be that second quarterback? Everybody just assumed that it would be Shadur Sanders, but it was Jackson Dart going to the New York Giants at pick number 25 in the first round. To me, with Brian DeBall, this is a very interesting pick. You signed Russell Wilson. You bring in Jameis Winston. Those are your 1 and your 2. We know Russell Wilson's going to at least start the year as quarterback. Where does Jackson Dart get development? Because he's not going to get many reps in practice during the week because Russell Wilson's going to get most of them. Well, he doesn't get together. Thanks going to Jameis Winston because he's the backup. So what's going to be Jackson Dart's development here? I think that's going to be an interesting part of this whole deal. And Tommy DeVito's still there, but I figure he would get cut. But I don't know. That's my really question. I think Jackson Dart. There were some games this past year that I believe that he threw away, particularly that Florida game. I mean, it's just some bad interceptions down the end. It's like let's just throw it up. Let's just kind of give up on the game here with that one. So interesting pick. I mean, if they hadn't signed both quarterbacks, you signed one of them. Okay, that's different. But which we know Russell Wilson not what he once was, and Jameis Winston is a backup quarterback. That's just what he is in the league. Now, of course, we're getting the 2026 mock drafts out. Now, this is per CBS Sports. For next year, the first 4 players they have picked are SEC guys. Arch Manning to them is the number 1 pick going to the Saints. So obviously they don't think the Saints are going to have a good year, which the Saints have a lot of rebuilding they have to do. Then you have Drew Aller from Penn State going into to Cleveland. So it's the top 3. And then you have linebacker Anthony Hill from Texas. Really good linebacker going to the Giants. So you're telling us you don't think the Giants are going to be good. So with Jackson Dart be quarterback 2026. Then you have Caleb Banks from Florida coming in there. I think Florida's going to be a hot team. A lot of people are going to be jumping on the Florida bandwagon because of DJ Lagway and just the way the team ended the season. And this is going to be another one of those players, Florida, Caleb Banks on defense line. At 5, you had on the edge Ruben Being going from Miami going to the Titans. Then at Las Vegas, picking Lenore Sellers from South Carolina. That one I'm having a hard time. Garrett Nussmeier, I would have him ahead of Sellers. I'm sorry. I just don't think Sellers is an NFL quarterback. Other SEC players, former SEC player Caleb Downs, he's in the top 10 going to New England. So you have it there. But then you also have DraftKings listed their favorites to be the number 1 overall pick. Arch Manning once again at the top, Drew Aller from Penn State. Now Garrett Nussmeier jumps in here from LSU. Then you have Lenore Sellers. Then you have Kate Clubman. Of course, your big betting favorite is going to be quarterback. It's just where it is, of course. TJ Parker coming from Clemson, Caleb Downs, Ohio State, then Auburn. We're tied all the way back. It all goes in a circle. Back to Auburn. Keldrick Falk, talented player. I expect him to have a breakout season for the Tigers this upcoming season. I think he's going to put some big sack numbers. I really do. First overall pick by DraftKings. He's in the running for that. And according to them, he will be the first round pick Auburn's had since 2020 when Derek Brown went in the first round. So it'll be big. And Hugh Freeze's got to get Auburn back today. He's brought talent in. Now it's time to get these guys in the first and second days of the NFL draft. Because again, as I said, top show, Auburn only had players taken on the third day. So got to get that changed for sure. And that's going to end the show. Auburn baseball did get a win on Tuesday night against Sanford 3-0. Big series this weekend against the Tennessee Volunteers, and we'll have you covered for all of that over at the Auburn Wire. Like I said, plan is I'm going to try to debut the Packers podcast later on in the week. If not, that'll be coming your way next week, and it will not be too much longer until the other podcast, the Wiregrass High School Football Report, the retooled show, will also return soon. So, podcasting, writing, busy. Hey, we're in the time of the year we say, man, there's not much going on, but plenty to discuss with all these topics. Anyways, you can follow me on social media at PJordan SEC podcast, available all your favorite podcast platforms, and also over on YouTube. Check out my written work over at the Auburn Wire and Last Word on College Football, where I write about Christian Todd. And also email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Glad to be back. Probably made some mistakes, fumbled some stuff in that open. Probably went too long going on and on about the changes and everything. But we'll be more tightened up on the next few shows moving forward. But anyways, I appreciate it, guys. Means a lot. Anybody that checks out what I'm doing. But anyways, until next time. Bye-bye.